Morning, everybody. The Simple Handicap for Friday, September 20th. Thank you for making me a part of your morning. If you're listening on Apple and Spotify and you're wondering why it sounds like I'm underwater, it's because the microphone took quite a tumble last night. Out of elation and celebration on the Garrett Wilson completed touchdown catch that very much looked like a 100-yard INT return by Christian Gonzalez. What a throw by Rodgers. Jumped up, knocked the microphone about 8 feet off of the desk, and I can't get it to turn on. So apologize for the sound quality today if you're listening, walking the dog on your way to work, wherever you might be, and it sounds a little bit off. I'll have it fixed up for the Sunday evening show and figure out what's going on or go out and get a new mic. Before I get into the final market rundown for NFL week number 3, just want to recap what happened last night. If you have not watched the live reaction video, that is live on the YouTube channel. If you're watching on YouTube this morning, it's down below. If you're on Apple or Spotify, would love it if you jumped over, watched the video. Let me know what you think of these. I have fun doing them. If you're enjoying them too, let me know. Takeaways from the game. One, Rodgers continues to answer questions about doubts that people had about him coming into the season. Mobility, I think that was answered with an exclamation point. He's back. He can move. He looks like a 40-year-old in the pocket. Number two, his arm, live. As good as you're going to see accuracy-wise from any quarterback. Early game plan, brilliant. You had early down passes. You had a ton of them. That's what the Seahawks did to take advantage of the Pats early. That's what the Jets needed to do to open up the ground game. 60% success rate on early down throws last night for the Jets. That has to continue every week, all season, regular season, playoffs, everything. Keep throwing the football on first and second down. You've got to keep doing it. That opens up everything for the Jets. It allows Rodgers to get those quick passes out, keep the defenses on balance. It's so important. The fact they did it shows when it works, that is how good the offense can look. Lots of positives to take away from that. The negatives. But Nathaniel Hackett in the second half got very run happy. He almost lulled himself to sleep. The offense operates very slowly by choice. The play clock continuously with Aaron Rodgers under center is sub 4 seconds at snap. I mean, it is glacial. It is as slow as it gets for an offense in 2024. When it works, it's amazing. When it's not working, that's trouble because you can do this when everything's going well. What it really doesn't allow teams to do this, and the Jets at this pace, what it's not going to allow them to do is really pull away from opponents. That box score had the Jets outgaining the Pats by 300 yards. It was a 24-3 final. And that's, in a way, like a little bit generous. A lot of third downs on some of those drives completed. When it became run, let Aaron figure out third down in the second half, that's where the Jets offense really flirts with disaster. That's not going to work against better opponents. When it's figure things out with Aaron on first and second down and then running short down and distance, that's amazing because it just opens up everything for this offense. And so that's something to watch going forward. The blitz from the defense was at the highest rate ever for a Robert Saleh Jets team. They dialed it up. It worked almost every single time. It was incredibly effective. I worry a little bit that that's when stepping up in class going to be a bit of a problem. Luckily for the Jets, these next 6 weeks, with the exception of the Buffalo game in mid-October, these are all must-win games that they've got to have to keep stacking these wins early before the schedule flips late. So they've got time to figure this out and get it right. But what we saw in the first half was very, very promising. So that was a very good win and cover for the New York Jets. Let's get to this market rundown and start off with the Sunday games. It's the LA Chargers on the road at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh still a 1 or 1.5 point favorite, depending where you look in this game. The total is still 35.5. Any way that you look in this game, no movement, no major injury news on either side. Not a whole lot to talk about in this one. We've been locked in on the side and the total for the last couple of days. It is where it is. In terms of speculation for moves, I really don't have one in this game on where this is going to go and where this is going to head. I still think the Steelers matchup against the Greg Roman offense is very interesting, and that is why I've been leaning towards the Steelers all week. But in terms of where the next bet's going to be, don't really have a take. Chicago on the road at the Indianapolis Colts. It is still Indy, a 1.5 point favorite. Total is still 43.5. Josh Downs is back for the Colts. He is going to be good to go. A lot of preseason notes about how much he was thriving in the offense through OTAs, through early training camp. And He suffered the injury, and then it brought in Alec Pierce, who's looked great. So this is another weapon for Indy that continues to make this offense that, believe it or not, is 0.1 yards per play worse than the New Orleans Saints. I did Memphis ESPN radio, and I put the hosts, John might be listening, put him on the spot. Said, has the Saints offense been good so far? They said, duh, obviously. Well, believe it or not, the Colts offense has been nearly as good, just a tenth of a yard of a play worse. Now you added another receiver. We could still see those explosive plays. I think Caleb Williams looks great in this game. The total, it got to 44 for a second and it came back. I don't agree with this coming back. I think this is a number that's got to be on the other side of 44. I don't know if it's going to get bet that way with how important 44 is for totals. But to me, this is just a game where both of these teams are going to score. Houston on the road at the Minnesota Vikings. The Texans, a 2-point favorite across the board. Nico Collins was back at practice yesterday. Sigh of relief for everybody who might have him in fantasy. You might be looking at him in props, or maybe you're a Texans fan. He is going to be good to go, barring any setback today. League's leading receiver, 252 yards through 2 games, and he's going to be vital for Houston to find against this Brian Flores-led defense. This has the early week release from another service on Houston at 2 that pushed it up, but we have seen Pro Money continue to support Minnesota. A little bit of a disagreement yesterday as this is now settled back at 2 after it was 1 for the majority of the last 36 hours. New York Giants on the road at the Cleveland Browns. Touch of Cleveland money into the market as we're up to 6.5 across the screen, but we're seeing 120 at FanDuel. We are seeing 120 at Jazz. We're seeing 115 at Pinnacle and 115 at BetOnline, leaning a little bit towards 7. Will we get there? Hard to say. Like everything around these 6s and 7s has just been so back and forth all season long. And so even if we do, we've already seen earlier in the week there was some appetite for the Giants at that price. When it gets to that again, I might expect that we see that coming back if it were to do that. Philadelphia on the road at the New Orleans Saints, 2.5 minus 20 at Chris, 3 even money at Circa, 3 even money at Buckeye. That's been really the same case scenario for the last 24 to 36 hours. No movement on this one. No movement really on the total. Got back to 49.5, but this at the lowest in the last couple days was lingering right at 49. So I wouldn't even call it a significant move getting up to that 49.5 because it's just been a slow bleed ever since open with over money coming into the market on this game. Denver on the road at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tampa Bay is a 6.5-point favorite. Total in this game has been right where it has been for the last day or two with just a touch of over money coming back into the market. We were up at 41 at Chris, Circa, and Buckeye this morning. And that has been, again, it was a half-point move yesterday as we were sitting at 40.5, but that was a 40.5 that was shaded to the over. When you look at this game, the big news that you have to watch today on the injury report is going to be what is going on with the defensive front for Tampa Bay. Cansey, Vea, and Hall, the 3 starters up front in that defensive line, all dealing with injuries. And you just have to watch to see what that status is. It seems less likely that Vea will go than anything. Cansey seems at best to be 50-50. No clear update on Hall. But, I mean, you take those guys out of the middle. And Denver, who wants to run the football and has a very expensive offensive line, they're going to be able to run the football. We know the Buccaneers are banged up in the defensive secondary. The name you have to watch there, Antoine Winfield, has been operating on the side in practice so far this week. That's going to be a big name to watch, too. If you take the best safety and the best run stopper off this Bucs defense and you're asking them to cover 6.5 at home, I think the Broncos are going to be quite competitive in this one if the injuries shape up as poorly as they look like they are going to be doing. I like the 6.5 there. Green Bay on the road at the Tennessee Titans. We still don't have Jordan Love news. We'd have nothing official. Josh Jacobs is on the injury report, but seems likely to go as he was getting a bit of a rest day on Wednesday as he was dealing with just fatigue from carrying the football 100 times against the Indianapolis Colts. But the big news here is Jordan Love. Market yesterday had a popular podcast, Give Out the Tennessee Titans. We saw some follow-up from that. We saw Jordan Love back in practice, but even after the videos, this still started to leak up. If you listen to the preview on Wednesday, you know I like the Titans in this spot. I'll be blown away. I will be blown away if they trot Jordan Love out there in a game before the Minnesota Vikings division game next week, where the Vikings could, as they continue to get pro money, could end up pulling off the upset. And that becomes a massive game in the later portion of September To put Jordan Love back here against the Titans just seems wild to me if they do that. The market is saying they're not going to. If it is officially ruled out, I do think we see this get back to Titans 3 or potentially a little bit higher. If it is Love, this is going to go to the other side, and I think the Packers might get to that 2.5 range with just the data that shows what it's like when a quarterback comes back early. Heard Rob Zola talk about that earlier this week on Forward Progress. It just seems like a crazy spot for me to consider doing anything like that, and this just sets up to look like a good Titan spot at home. Carolina on the road at the Las Vegas Raiders. 5 is the number. Left to right across the screen. The one exception, FanDuel, up to 5.5. Interesting note on this from Dave Mason over at BetOnline. The Carolina Panthers in this game have the most money bet on them of any side at BOL, but the individual ticket count of bets made at BetOnline is the highest on the Las Vegas Raiders. It is just the ultimate divide, and you're getting that report directly from a I'll say reputable book. People are going to come at me. Whoa, offshore. We love offshores. You're getting that from a book, a single source that's talking about straight bets. Means a lot. And it's a pretty telling statistic. This is a game internally has had a ton of back and forth with opinions on numbers, on what is Dalton going to mean. Fascinating point spread, fascinating total, which got bet up, and now we're seeing other money come back in. The Carolina Panthers are an incredibly difficult team to price at this point because there's one side of the argument that says this team is falling off a cliff, and we have that Dolphins 2019 team to be referenced to what it looks like when everything goes as bad as it can, and the Panthers are nowhere near that. There's another side of things, which I am on, that says the Panthers have potential, especially with Andy Dalton now in their center. And that has really been what has driven this line down from 7 to 5. But the question becomes, what is the fair price on this game? The market is saying it's 5. I have a feeling between now and kickoff there is going to be another move on this game just because it's such an easy game for someone on their own to have such a strong opinion about that I just envision there is going to be a scenario where there is conflict on this game that dictates which way it is going to go. And so that's going to be an interesting market to watch the next 48 hours. Miami on the road at the Seattle Seahawks. This is Seattle minus 4.5 left to right across the screen. The total is finally, it took long enough, up to 42.5 this morning at Circa Sports, 41.5 everywhere else. You see Circa take the jump. We're likely to see other books follow up as well. Big name to note here is Kenneth Walker. He is not back at practice. We talked about the oblique issue yesterday and that video that was posted. It seems very unlikely that he is going to go. DK Metcalf, who had some doubt, was back at practice. Seems like he is absolutely going to go as he is gearing up for a 12-round fight with Jalen Ramsey, which will absolutely bring off videos that we are going to enjoy watching on Sunday afternoon in the 5-game slate. Detroit on the road at the Arizona Cardinals. Detroit, not yet a 3-point favorite again. That surprises me. I think this game is going to 3. Total leaking up just a little bit, 51.5, shaded to the over at Chris. We're seeing 51.5 at Circa, Buckeye, and almost every other sportsbook too, but Chris leading the way, leaning back towards the 52. I think this should be 52 or higher, like in the over in this game. Baltimore on the road at the Dallas Cowboys. Ravens, a 1-point favorite. They were bet very quietly by a very respected group yesterday. No movement on the screen. I have a tough time getting to an opinion on this game, but very real pro support for the Baltimore Ravens from a very well-respected group that pushed this up just a touch, but a lot of it was done very quietly without much of an impact, and the Ravens are sitting as 1-point favorites. Total in this game is 48 left to right and across the screen. San Francisco on the road at the LA Rams. The 49ers, a 6.5-point favorite across the board. There was not one, but 2 releases from 2 different services yesterday on the Rams. That came around the time that the George Kittle news was broke, and that caused the stir on Twitter, as it always does when things are given out around injury times. People always love to react because they were rushing to bed at 2, and the services got to it first and probably likely ruined their plans. We saw this come off of the 7.5, get to 7, get to 6.5. George Kittle with the hamstring tightness. There was a report on RotoWorld that said he is looking at his status in doubt for this game. He is the guy who benefits the most when Deebo Samuel is not playing. Benefits may be an insensitive word to use from that, but from a prop perspective, when you look in games where Deebo doesn't play, it's always a big Kittle game. I was getting ready and looking at Kittle props. I was like, this is going to be it. You have the hamstring injury. He's potentially going to miss. That changes a lot with the 49ers offense. And you wonder, just pricing wise, right? No CMC, no Deebo Samuel, possibly no George Kittle. That's a big blow to the 49ers. And I get that the Rams have injury issues too. No Kupp, no Nakua, but the offensive line does get guys back. It's going to be healthier than we've seen in the last couple of weeks. And like you start to look at this, and it's the Niners on the road in a game that the Rams got to have at home, laying this big of a number. We were talking about the Rams on the preview to bigger price. I completely agree with the move. There is a bit of a battle back and forth with another bigger group on San Francisco, but so far the influence of the services plus the injuries have brought this number down. We're sitting at 6.5 this morning. KC on the road at the Atlanta Falcons. It's the Chiefs, a 3-point favorite. This looked like it was going to go to 2.5. Money comes back in from a few bets, pushes it back. We're now to 3 minus 15 at Chris, 3.5 even money over at FanDuel, 3.5 over at Heritage, and 105. We're looking at 3 minus 10 at Circa. Lots of Falcon support for a second week in a row coming into the market as there continues to be uncertainty about what level of play this offense should be graded at relative to some of those preseason expectations. Jacksonville on the road at the Buffalo Bills. This is still Bills -5 across the board. Total in this game still 45.5. And then it is Washington on the road at Cincinnati in the doubleheader of Monday Night Football. 7.5 for Cincinnati still across the board. Total 47 from left to right across the screen. No movement on the Monday night games, nor side, nor total. What we do know is we get a little bit of injury news as we have T. Higgins, who is back at practice, and he is in limited participation, but it is being deemed as more likely to play and make his debut than not. How effective is he going to be? I'm not sure. We've seen wide receivers that deal with injuries have started this season very slow in terms of snap count and usage. What are we going to get from Higgins? That's still something that is yet to be determined. I look at this game, and I'm just very intrigued by the Washington Commanders getting more than a touchdown against this Bengals defense, which to me is as big of a question with those injuries on the defensive line and figuring out what is the status going to be of Rankins and Hill. With those two guys in, which they desperately needed, they weren't stopping anybody on the ground. And so if those two guys are out and they're relying on guys they picked up signing off the street, that seems like a big ask against the Washington team that wants to attack you right in that section of the defense. So an interesting matchup shaping up that we will talk a lot more about on the Sunday evening live stream preview podcast, which will go live right after the final game of the afternoon slate completes. That'll be live on the RAS Picks YouTube channel. If you're listening to this on Apple or Spotify, would love to have you over there to watch the video. If you're watching on YouTube and you're enjoying it, and you're one of the first-timers, a lot of first-timers watching this show, it's great to see. I love the comments that you guys leave. It keeps me in line with what I'm doing when I'm wrong, but it also lets me know if you're enjoying the content too. So if you found the content useful and you have a second, if you're on YouTube, the subscribe button's down below. Leave a thumbs up before you go. And if you're on Apple or Spotify and you have a second, would really appreciate it if you hit pause, scroll down, leave a rating. If you're on Spotify, leave a rating. If you're on Apple and you have a second to leave a comment, that would be amazing too. Lots of work this week. Hopefully shapes up to be a good week. We got off to a great start with the Jets last night. Let's see how the rest of the week ends up going with some opinions that I absolutely feel very strongly about. Enjoy your Friday, everybody. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll talk to you again on the live stream. Look ahead to week 4, Sunday afternoon, after the late games go complete just before Sunday Night Football.